Her story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids.
The forces of evil on the dark side of devil right.
And I want to talk tonight about the devil and demons and witches and wizards.
And we just mix it up with hardcore and aggression and come out with something we think's an original sound.
Loud, fast, heavy, you know.
Well, what do you got?
What do you got?
You're listening to Riff Worship, the podcast that attempts to answer the age-old question, what makes a riff? Why do we care about riffs? Talking about albums featuring some of our favorite riffs. My name is Austin Paulson, and you're with me now. With me, as always, Justin Swindle, Dylan Adams. What's good? It's been a while.
We haven't done one of these in a minute.
Yeah. I didn't even know the show still existed. I thought it was done.
We've been talking to a lot of people.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're real upset about it.
Taking the piss out of everybody.
Well, I've been off for like 4 weeks. The last episode I did was fucking Mizmor in Hell.
And I wasn't there on that one.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's good to see everybody.
No.
No.
No, not at all. Yeah, it's fun. It's been a while since we've done one of these. You know, it'd be a shame if we did more of these like this at some point in the future. It'd be a damn shame.
It'll be a fun, quick one. Hopefully, maybe we'll see. We kind of like picked this record just for that occasion. I think.
Mm-hmm.
What's low stakes? A record we've probably listened to death. I think Swindle had like the best quote in our chat. What was it exactly?
I've listened to this album so much that like I can't even hear it anymore.
Yeah.
I just like put it on, and the next thing I know, the album's over, and I'm like, did I even listen to anything?
There were times on like many drives where I caught myself several times just going, oh, I think I missed a track. Like, I got to go back. Like, even when I swore to myself, I'm like, I'm going to listen to this and like not zone out or like go do other stuff randomly. I still like somehow just, it's kind of like white noise at this point, or like, I don't know.
Right.
In our DNA.
It's funny because I've listened to it on every format, CD, digital, but and I've had the record for it's one of the oldest records I've owned. It was given to me as a gift around 2010. And I've never fucking listened to this thing on vinyl. I've never done it. And I threw it on and I was like, yep, still feels the same. I know every little part in this. And I'm just going to say it. We're talking about Black Flag's Damaged. I think amongst like hardcore and punk records, this is one of those ones we can all agree on.
I remember in your 78 Pontiac Firebird listening to this record on 8-track.
8-track? I just bought a Firebird and I go around the mountains. I just do bong hits and just put the pedal to the metal, man. Geddy Lee rules, bro.
I don't know how he did it. He had the shit on Laserdisc. Like, God damn. Black Flag Damaged. I would agree. I think this is perhaps one of the oldest records in my collection too. I can remember it just being like in a stack leaning up against my dresser on the floor and like having that artwork just kind of stare you right in the eyes.
It's kind of a conundrum, right? Because it's someone it's Henry staring into a mirror, staring back at himself at you.
Right. I would say before I really got into like metal, my first kind of like venture into music that I felt was my own was like punk music. And that probably started really with the Ramones, and then through that Black Flag and probably Minor Threat. Like this record and the 2 7-inches essentially, like the Minor Threat, those two records are like so fucking important, and probably helped usher me into just more aggressive and weird forms of music. But I'd love to hear from Swindle. Where do you come into contact with Black Flag and this record?
I think I was like in high school. I got into like probably Bad Brains, Dead Kennedys, and Black Flag all around the same time. After having listened to like the Clash and the Sex Pistols and the Ramones for like a number of years, and then like somehow not knowing that any punk music existed after like
86
the fucking Ramones, yeah, like but actually without knowing it, the very first time I heard a Black Flag song was Gimme, 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 because it was on a fucking Perfect Circle cover album.
The Emotive record?
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
my God. What a strange cover.
Yeah.
I mean,
a lot of whispering.
I bet.
Dylan, where did you find Black Flag, bud?
So I did the reverse thing. I started with metal music, and then I got into hardcore through that. Obviously, I think the first, I'd probably heard the Ramones kind of sporadically here or there, but it didn't really hit. The first punk band that really hit for me, or hardcore adjacent band, was probably the Misfits, because through those early Metallica records, the T-shirts, Cliff Burton, etc. But I think Black Flag came from that. I'm sure I saw some photo of Rollins with Danzig or something along those lines, and that's where I dug into it. But I also saw like an episode of Fuse, some sort of show on Fuse, and somebody was interviewing Mike Vallely, and he was like, "Oh, I'm going to pick a Black Flag video to play. It's not my favorite Black Flag era, but I'm going to pick Six Pack because I have to." And it's like, now you look back and you're like, it's the pot calling the kettle black on that one. But I think I got through that. I obviously knew about Rollins even before any of that stuff. Just through like VH1 and their top 100 bands you need to know. And there was a whole block about the Rollins band. In every fucking TV show that he was on and movie, it was a guest spot on.
He's a talking head on
everything.
Fucking everything. I remember, you know what? Without even knowing
Bad Boys 2. He played a cop in Bad Boys 2.
I remember he plays the hockey coach in Jack Frost.
Oh, that's right. And it's great.
And I saw that in the theater, but I would have never have known.
Yeah. Neurotic and screaming, which is great.
There's that. And then there's the movie Snow Day that has Iggy Pop. He's playing the music for the ice rink. But you would like, I was a huge Stooges fan. Again, another record that was like really important to me was that first Stooges record. I don't know why or how I bought it, but and then some director that's making a kids movie about
a
snow day.
Iggy was in Pete and Pete.
That's right. Yeah, that's true.
He was in Pete and Pete. It's wild because after like learning all of this stuff about metal and hardcore, and you realize that, Rollins was kind of everywhere. He, his take was, I got to make money somehow. So, just shove my dumb face everywhere. But I don't think I owned a Black Flag record till I was in my late teens. And I think it might have been like the first 4 years or something. But I originally downloaded a shitload of stuff from LimeWire. Statute of Limitations is out. I did it. And I got a different version of Six Pack that was on there. I can't even remember what version it was, but it was, it may have been Dez singing on it.
Yeah,
as
I think that's the other one. Yeah.
But that's kind of my foray into like Black Flag. And then obviously seeing like Anselmo wearing, the Black Flag Bars t-shirt. Matter of fact, the first time I saw Down in like 2007, really intimate venue, he's got the, kind of the reverse version of the Black Flag shirt. Rather than the standard white one with the black bars, it was the black one with the white bars. I'm like, all right, I got to dig more into this band because it's like something about this connects to that. And to me, Black Flag kind of starts here with what we're talking about today, which is where I grasped it. Obviously, the band has had a couple EPs before, and a lot of some of these songs are real fucking old. Some of these songs have been around since like 77.
Yeah. I mean, as we'll learn, I think this band had tried to record a full length several times, and it just did not pan out until now. But yeah, it is interesting. Even getting into Black Flag thinking like, well, Henry Rollins is like the face of this bit. Like he's the guy. It's like, not really. He's not even like the leader of the band in, a lot of ways, but I always associated this band with him. And so you had several lead singers before this. And a lot of people, even probably from that era, who loved the band would probably not even consider, a guy who recorded this record verbatim, a quote said, "I thought you ruined the band when you joined."
And, it's really wild, right? That a lot of people have that opinion, and everybody can have their own opinion. It's their thing. Who knows what an MS-13 tattoo actually looks like, but everybody has their own opinion. Henry was the fourth vocalist. It was Keith, Ron, Dez, and Henry. Henry is the longest tenured vocalist in that band. He did the hardest fucking touring in that band. He became the focal point of that band for many, many years. And he gets the most shit. He got the most shit from everybody. People are saying like he ruined the band. Like, was he arguably the best vocalist? That's depending on it. I thought Dez did a fantastic job. I thought Dez sounded awesome. I thought he sounded better than Keith. And Keith on that first EP, the Nervous Breakdown EP, is fantastic. But I thought Keith sounded better with like the Circle Jerks, and even later with Off. I thought he sounded awesome on those records, those EPs, I should say. And Ron, like the tracks for the Ron EP are really good. But Ron's voice didn't do anything. Something about a 20-year-old Henry Rollins just going, "This is my fucking ticket. I have to like prove myself on this." And you can hear it all over this record. Yeah, he's just like, I got to do what I can.
Before we get into it, I just want to say that I personally take some solace in knowing that before I met you, Hank had at least ruined your life a little bit and brought at least an amount of sadness into your life before you ever ran across me.
Why is that?
Just like I feel like getting into Black Flag through Damage probably brought you sadness before you moved to Bowling Green.
That's true.
And I introduced Thou and Grindcore and into your life.
I was primed up for it. Right. It was bound to happen, but you just pulled the trigger. I mean, you met me. I had a Damaged shirt that I wore to fucking pieces. I still have it somewhere, but it is a rag at this point. But yeah, I fucking love this record. But going through this as a starting point, you kind of you go to the records that came after, some of the spoken word stuff that's kind of weird and out there, instrumental music. But before this, you had like several EPs with different lead singers. So let's talk about Panic. The band Panic formed in 1976 with Keith Morris and Greg Ginn in Hermosa Beach, California. Hermosa Beach, of course, is in LA County. There's a beach. I always found that funny that like some of the most like aggressive sounding shit came from here. Whereas like, I always think of like like how dangerous I thought like New York hardcore was, but then like I listened to like this record, for instance, and I'm like, this is like a very disorienting, kind of like gutting, depressing record. And I'm like, oh, it's hot. And it's like people are at the beach, ice cream cone eating motherfuckers just down at the beach.
I mean, you've got some really depraved records that came from that period. You look at like TSOL, which is one of my favorite punk bands. Fear is from that same kind of region, right? Pretty gnarly, like grotesque record. The first Fear record is Dead Kennedys are from that same area. It's like all of this really, it's a melting pot of just different bands and different viewpoints and all of this stuff. And it's weird to think that you live in this area that's known for like palm trees and the beach and all these beautiful houses and faces and whatnot, and it's like, oh no, there's an underbelly, and most of us are having to fight over a candy bar just to eat once in a week, kind of thing.
about a decade later, we'd find out from like the rap side of the underbelly, like Compton and shit like that. Like there are big patches of LA that are not doing great.
Yes. But this project, Panic Black Flag, essentially starts in a record store. It's called Rubicon. It's where Keith Morris worked. And so I guess this record store owner had a crush on Greg Ginn's sister. And so Greg Ginn's sister and would take Greg to the record store. The owner and Greg's sister would go walk somewhere and hang out. And then Keith and Greg would just be left to their own devices. I think there's like a quote. It was just like, they're always spitting like Joni Mitchell and Bruce Springsteen and stuff. And I'd take that shit off and I'd put on, Deep Purple and Uriah Heep and all these things. And I did find it funny that like, Keith always seemed like kind of like a Hesher kind of hippie guy. And, one of the things that they kind of connected on was this like concert at the Civic Center, Journey and Thin Lizzy. And that was kind of like a pivotal moment. Said like, hey, like Greg's like, I got a handful of songs. Let's like get together and start jamming and maybe make a band together.
God, you look at I'm sure some of the early influences, right? Like, of course, the Ramones are in there, but some of that early proto hard rock, borderline proto punk, like Stooges, MC5, probably Blue Cheer, you could throw them in there, Black Sabbath, even like just the really gnarly heavy shit that was around that period of time. There was a bonding of that as well. I mean, you can hear Black Sabbath and the Black Flag guitar tone. It's fucking there.
It's funny though. They talk about like, this punk scene in LA kind of starting to bubble up, but they, at least Keith kind of describes themselves as like nerds. They were like they had no idea they were still going to see like bands like Skynyrd and Ted Nugent at the arenas and stuff like that. But the Ramones they mentioned being like a huge kind of gateway influence into that world.
Shit, I probably forgot to mention this. I don't know if Swindle's a fan. I know it. I don't get it, and I never will. The Germs. That's a huge influence on that punk scene as well. That's a big deal. That was like the band for a lot of the California guys.
So I think they're like trying out a few different people. I think they said they kind of had a few different bass players. One of which is Greg's brother, who we'll get into a little later. But they meet up with Chuck Tukowski, born Gary Arthur McDaniel. Chuck was in a band called Worm, and they had this, I think they're kind of like a sludgy kind of sounding band, but from what I understand, this band lived in Hermosa Beach, and they had like a house where they'd have parties called the Wormhole. And so Greg and Keith would come over to the house and hang out. And so I think they just kind of like, struck up a friendship. And that's kind of how Chuck joined Panic rather.
What an intense dude. I've seen a lot of interviews with Chuck, particularly The Decline of Western Civilization, where he does a lot of the talking in that. And some of the early Black Flag shows, like he's a force on those early shows. Like he's a kind of a wall of a man during this period. And when I think of Black Flag, I think of the lineup we're discussing today, which is Chuck, Greg, Robo, Dez, and Henry. And I think that was the most violent sounding version of the band. There's other lineups of the band that were good too, like the My War era, which had Kira on bass, and you had Bill Stevenson on drums, which I thought was a feral sounding fucking band. But I think this one was just the most abrasive and violent sounding. And it doesn't help either that you've got this weird kind of relationship amongst the band too. But anyway, I digress.
Speaking of Robo, he would like the band's, drummer. They found him in an ad for Penny Saver.
Robo lives in a cabinet.
Yeah, if you look at the Decline of Western Civilization, it's like, well, I should mention, yeah, there's this really kind of like staple of this scene is the church, right? And they cover it in The Decline of Western Civilization, where it literally was like an old church that had shut down, and then like all these art and punk kids took over, and some members of Black Flag lived there, including Ron and Robo. And there's like a part in the documentary where like I think Robo has like the like closet basically, or no, Ron has the closet and Robo lives in like a cupboard up above, and they paid like $13 for rent, and they were still struggling. Like they were like, I gotta find $13 like to live in this fucking shithole.
It was their practice space. It was this church. Some of the guys were living in it. I think there were people from other bands living in it. There might have been some of the guys from Red Cross living in it at the time too.
So like later on, because like, you know, Keith is the first vocalist of this band. He's on the Nervous Breakdown EP, the debut EP. But yeah, they met Ron. I think that's essentially how they met Ron, because Ron and Dez were like best buddies. They were like neighbors together, but they lived up the street from this place. And then I think Ron, he like moved out when he was like 15 and then lived at the church. He played drums in Red Cross before they changed it to Red Cross with the K. And so that's essentially how that happened. But debut EP, 7-inch Nervous Breakdown, 79, 2,000 copies initially released, pressed for $1,000. It was originally supposed to be released on a label called Bomb Records, which was like a guy who like published the fanzine that like Lester Bangs, I think, wrote for, and like all this stuff. They started this independent label, and they released stuff by like the Modern Lovers and the Stooges and Devo. They were going to release this EP, but they took fucking forever. So thus Greg and Chuck swoop in with SST, which I believe, if I remember right, it solid state transmitters is what this stands for. Greg is a fucking nerd and had like a little business where he had like radio. It was a radio parts company that he had owned since he was like a teenager. And so he basically he transitioned that into the label that released all the band's records and a bunch of other records that we fucking love. This is also the first introduction of Raymond Pettibon.
Oh.
Who Raymond Ginn, Greg's younger brother.
Those brothers really like each other a lot.
Yeah, they do. They definitely still talk and are friends.
Oh yeah, still talk. Haven't not talked since 85 at all.
God. But Ray is responsible for most of the Black Flag art, all the posters, the logo,
created
itself.
The bars. Yep.
Which Dylan has.
I do.
The bacon strips is what I
nope.
remember you calling it.
Nope. Wyatt has
that. Wyatt has the bacon strips.
Wyatt has that one. Mine was
bacon flag.
Yeah, mine's a really small one that's all started to blur together at this point. But that's kind of, I would argue to say that that's probably one of the most common kind of punk rock tattoos at this point in time.
Yeah.
Definitely.
How'd you get yours again?
I got mine by a buddy at his house.
Yeah, how'd you pay for it?
Sonic Hamburger. Sonic Hamburger. And you know, it's kind of like, you know, it is a flag. Like it's a beacon of like DIY, you know, it's the whole thing, it's the whole vibe. And Raymond's artwork is so synonymous with this band that it is really wild that his artwork's not undamaged. It's really wild to think about.
Yeah. You think about everything else that they did, essentially. Everything else, I feel like. But
it's essentially the only record his artwork's not on. I even think he did the instrumental EP they did at the tail end. That might have been the very last thing.
Definitely is it Family Man?
He did that one.
Yeah, all that stuff. It's
Loose Nut, Slip It In, My War. Like he did all the full lengths for sure.
Right. But yeah, and this is before the bars even happen. Like the bars aren't on this. But yeah, I mean, probably even, you know, kind of what we were talking about before of maybe like this band kind of always being around, or like figures in this band being around. I feel like whether you knew the band or not, you know the logo. I mean, it's just kind of in our pop culture at this point. It's everywhere, right? I mean, it's in what's that Atari song? I don't know why that was the first thing I thought.
I got a Black Flag sticker on my Cadillac. Oh, the Don Henley cover?
The Don Henley cover.
Boys of Summer. Yeah, rather than the Deadhead sticker.
It's everywhere, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. I think I saw the Black Flag logo first before the band. And I'm pretty certain I saw it with like one of those CCS magazines or something with all the skateboard stuff in it. I'm certain I saw it there.
That makes complete sense. I mean, yeah, skateboarding and this band or like this area of the world, just, bread and butter, man.
Hand in hand.
Hand in hand. Lamb and tuna fish.
I hate you. So Nervous Breakdown, EP's released.
Keith leaves,
forms the Circle Jerks with members of Red Cross.
Yeah.
And
that was pretty quick.
Real quick. And there's a bit of, so if you listen to the first Circle Jerks album, there's some stuff on there that sounds oddly like early Black Flag riffs. It's there. There was a huge dispute about all that stuff at a certain point. But Keith has went on to have a pretty good career. He's kind of become a talking head himself throughout the years. Circle Jerks are actually currently touring. But he had Off, which I thought Off was the best thing he did. Those first like couple of Off EPs are fucking great. I Don't Belong is one of the standout tracks for me. I'm standing in the shadows, pissing in the punch bowl.
Yeah.
Ultimate lyric for me.
That's wasn't that their first fucking joint?
I
can't joint on the first EP.
I can't remember if that's on the first one or the second one, but it's real. They came out so quick.
We'll talk about it, but like, Ron being in Decline of Western Civilization, being the next singer, like their Circle Jerks are in that documentary too, like playing. So I was just like, the turnover from that is pretty wild. But yeah, Ron lived at the church and he rehearsed there with Red Cross, and they would go, I think even when they were young, him and Dez would go in and like watch that band, like, essentially rehearse. I think one day Keith just wasn't there and they asked him if he wanted to like try out or sing with them or whatever. And that's essentially how that happened. But you get Jealous Again, 1980 SST. I think this was intended to be their first like full length album, but it just didn't come to fruition. But you have some great songs on here. The title track's great, No Values. But Ron essentially leaves Black Flag like not that long later. I think, or he they were, playing all these shows, and I think he walked off stage and like maybe people filled in when he was singing, and he was just kind of like, yeah, I like this. I don't have any problem with these guys, but clearly they don't care if I like leave. So he just kind of dips, and I think he moved to Vancouver. They were on tour. They played in Canada, and he fell in love with it. I think he essentially migrated to Canada.
Black Flag caused me to leave the country. It's a kind of a recurring trend with this band, with how vocalists leave on occasion. Because I believe Ron came back many, many, many years later to this band, and I think quit the band by walking off stage again, or he was escorted off stage, however you look at it. But at this point, it's like, Greg me again, shame on you.
Oh my God. I guess if he was the person that wrote much of the lyrics, then I guess good on him for thinking he has the right to do whatever he wants with the vocalist. But it kind of says a lot that he's just willing to move on with it means nothing to him that these people leave the band, and he thinks he can get people to fill in like nothing. Like everybody in the band is expendable, and Greg can just do whatever the fuck he wants with any of them. Like that kind of says something.
I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea what you're talking about. Henry Rollins was the last Black Flag singer. They broke up and they stayed broken up.
Be careful. You might get your ass whipped for saying that.
Fuck Greg. Tell him.
I'm not talking about him. I'm not talking about Greg.
My name is Justin Swindle.
But even even Mike V left the band.
Yeah.
He even left the band.
Yeah. If Greg wants to fight, I'll take Mike V on him. We've seen him in that freaking
dude. So
4 of them.
Ron's friend, good buddy, Dez, there was a quote. Ron had become their vocalist after Keith Morris left, but Ron ended up quitting the band and moving up to Vancouver. There was a time when they weren't playing because they had no vocalist. I remember walking up to the church one day and Chuck was out front. He had a trunk of his car open and had a case of beer in there. That was the real punk rock thing to do back then. Chuck offered me one of these beers and we started talking. He was like, why don't you try out to be the singer for the band? You're at all the shows and sing along. We went in and I sang 4 or 5 songs. And then he said, we're leaving in a week for tour. I couldn't believe it. They were my favorite band. But that didn't last very long either.
No.
He does appear on, the 6-pack EP. Again, some great fucking songs, the title track, which we will discuss later as well.
Great artwork on that one too.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the one with the guy cowering in the corner, right? Like with it looks like a bunch of like handprints and smears and stuff on the cover of it.
Yeah. And then of course he does the Louie 7-inch as well. Yeah. So, I mean, this band toured very, very hard. I feel like they often describe some of their local shows as just like full on fucking riots, to the point where it became very difficult for them to play in their own hometown. And the police almost kind of like pressured them to leave town. So they were on the road fucking constantly. Like, I mean, you hear about like, obviously the book Get in the Van, where you just like, maybe they didn't even have their plans, where they're going to play exactly planned out. They just they went.
I mean, there's stories in Get in the Van and specifically the American Hardcore book that I think all three of us have read, about the phones being tapped at the church by the police and like and undercover cops like watching the church and thinking Black Flag was this like cult or some sort of like group of people that was there. It's a bunch of fucking weirdos playing fast music. Like, get over it. Go do something with that salary you're being paid, you fucking chumps. But anyway, Dez, I will say this, Dez ended up wanting to play guitar in the band, wanted to play second guitar, and Dez is a pretty damn good guitarist. I saw Dez with the Misfits.
I remember that era.
10 or 15 years ago. Yep. Robo was on drums, actually.
So funny.
And Robo was in the Misfits for like their most known period as well. So it's weird. Like all those guys kind of, tight with each other.
Dez originally from the New Jersey area himself. I think his dad was like an A&R guy for like some of these like record labels before they moved to California. But yeah, I don't know, just a random tidbit. But Dylan is right. Dez wanted to move to rhythm guitar. So that's in the back of the mind. They're like gonna start looking for somebody. Enter Henry Lawrence Garfield, 1961, born that year, Washington, D.C. I always love reading like, he was definitely into like more hard rock stuff growing up until they started to get Ramones records. And, obviously the DC scene is crazy in its own right.
Motherfucker's best friend is Ian MacKaye.
Right. Like, I think he, there's always like the pictures of him like singing along with like HR from the Bad Brains. Like, yeah, him and Ian MacKaye, best friends growing up, discovering a lot of music together. I believe Henry even like roadied for the Teen Idols, that first band. I think he tried to be their singer at first, but the other guys weren't into it. So he did, SOA, State of Alert. They did that record. You got Discord Records there that released a lot of these great little, stuff. I think the Teen Idols EP, I think even came out like after that band had broken up, right? They like put it out just to prove that they existed, basically.
Right. Wasn't the SOA record like the second release on Discord?
I think so. Yeah, it had to have been within like
Discord number
5, right? Yeah, like it couldn't have been that much. But I always love the quote, and he said it a million times. I come from the minimum wage working world, yeah. And he was like a manager at a Haagen-Dazs ice cream joint that Ian worked at, working, paying rent, paying bills, going to shows. I believe a mutual friend of Ian and Henry showed them Black Flag. They showed him the Nervous Breakdown 7-inch, and they fell in love with it. And so like the band, I think, came to New York. They drove up to see them early there. They also played in DC. They stayed at Ian's house, so they got connected. And I think Chuck gave him like a little demo of some of the songs.
I think I've mentioned it before on this show, but I read the Beastie Boys book, and that New York show actually like started. Obviously, it made Henry like eventually be the vocalist of Black Flag, but it made all three members of the Beastie Boys want to start a punk band. They were all three at that show, even though they didn't meet each other. But it also made Kim Deal and Thurston Moore want to start Sonic Youth.
That's
so that
crazy.
one show like essentially led three different bands into like the trajectory that would make them.
That's like the Ramones playing in the UK. Like the Clash were there, and I think the Damned were there, and like all of those guys were like, we have to form a band. Like it's weird.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's like genuinely wild. That, I mean, think of those three separate bands and the influence that they had on just popular music in general is fucking bananas. So I don't let Greg hear that. He'll definitely I think they returned to New York not long after. Again, just playing shows all the time. They did not have a DC show on this date. So Henry, again, ventured up to New York to see the band. I think he hung out with the band pretty much all day. And then he had to leave like mid-show to go back to work. I think he like basically just rolled right in and like went and did his shift. But before he did, he got on stage and performed one of his like favorite songs with the band. And that was kind of like their first taste of Henry on vocals.
This is if I can remember the quote. This next song's called Clocked In, and Henry's going to sing it.
Yep.
And it just, there it went. And he sang the song, left, went back, wrote in, worked his shift, showered in the mop sink basically, or the prep sink. And did all that. And around this period of time, the band reached out to him. Said, hey man, Dez wants to move to second guitar. We're looking for a vocalist. You want to try out? And, from what I gathered from some of Henry's interviews, he didn't tell a fucking soul. He didn't tell a soul.
That's like us at our jobs.
Right.
Don't fucking say anything about real life.
No. What do you like? What do you like to do? Nothing. I'm a husk.
I stare at the wall when I get home.
Yeah.
He didn't tell Ian. He didn't tell anybody. He took a day off from work just to take a day off. Like, got in touch with his boss. Like, hey, I need a day off. It's like, sure. Drove back up there. Did a few songs with the band. He basically stated, whatever lyrics I didn't know, I made up on the spot. Like, did a few songs, had a great time. We went outside, took a break for a minute, and Chuck just looked at him and was like, so you in? What do you mean? What are you asking me? You want to? What are you going on? Do you want to be in the band? Like, okay, what do I do? Well, you go home, you gather your things, you sell whatever you have, and you meet us in Detroit. But the story loosely goes, Henry goes back to DC, heads straight home, meets Ian, like, who has been like calling him, trying to figure out where he's at. Is like, hey, where the fuck have you been? You've out of the radar. You didn't tell anybody what's going on. And he tells Ian what happened. And he's like, how do you feel about this? And Ian's like, what are you talking about, man? You're going to be great. Like, go do this shit. Quits his job, actually makes a really good deal with his boss. He's like, hey man, I got to do this thing. Well, the boss being the contrarian, is like, you'll be back here in 6 months. He's like, you know what? If I am, sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Sure. Which, yeah. So, I mean, he met the band in New York, or I'm sorry, he met the band in Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially kind of roadied for them for the remainder of that tour. Dez continued to be on vocals, and then he would like practice vocals maybe like when they were doing like sound check or like encores and stuff to kind of like learn the songs.
Louie.
I did find it funny. You read Get in the Van.
Yeah.
And which is such a fun, it's a quick read, or you can listen to it on like, audiobook, and it's great.
Yeah.
He does it. But my favorite part of it is like how excited he is for like maybe the first quarter, half of the book, and then it's just like I'm in hell. This is fucking miserable. Like they essentially do the rest of that tour, and you can kind of get a taste of what, you know, being in Black Flag is like at this time, like fights and getting shit like thrown at you, and, you know, not getting paid and not eating. And I think the craziest thing really is the band went to Europe before they had released this record. They only had like the fucking 6-pack 7-inch or whatever out. Like they had nothing out, and they're going to Europe to do a tour, and like, you know, staying with, I think there's the story of them staying with like 2 random American girls, and, you know, they bailed them out of jail a few times and all this shit. It's genuinely insane.
Is this the tour they took Ian on? Because like there's some great stories. Like if you've never read Get in the Van, read it. It's kind of if you've ever played in a band, done shows, or you've traveled out of state, done tours of any, read the book. You know, it's all there. Like definitely read it. And you know, Black Flag essentially created DIY touring. Let's face it. Like they're the reasons a lot of us still do it, and a lot of other people still do it. Like they did it. They did all the grunt work. They did the hard work. They were self-sufficient, self-sustaining. A lot of the money, if they ever made it, went right back into the band. No one made anything. If they ate, it was like once every few days. You know, there's the funny story about the guy staying at SST, and someone saw the fact that Henry had like chocolate in the corner of his mouth, and they're like, "You ate today?
You fucking ate a candy bar?
You ate a fucking candy
you had
bar?
A candy bar today?"
I love there's the one story where they're in San Francisco, and they fucking see that like oh my god, Jello is like at a fucking Chinese restaurant, and they go in and just start eating his food like right in front of him.
And he didn't care.
No.
If I were Jello, I wouldn't fuck with them. Jello doesn't seem like the physically fighting type. He would have got his ass handed to him by Henry.
There was the other thing from that book where he like, they were playing that show and he just jumped on some dude, and it ended up being like he's screaming at this random person like, "Oh yeah, that's Jello.
Sorry, Jello."
Sorry,
I mean,
sorry, bud.
There's another great eating story where like he's got a day with like Dukowski, and they're just like going around putting flyers out and stuff. Like, and they used to put flyers up with like, oh god, it was like wheat paste and super glue mixed together so you couldn't get the stuff off. And like the cops were pissed, which is even better. But they were like getting hungry, and they go into this grocery store, and Henry's like, "We don't have any money." He's like, "Here's what you do." And they're just biting hunks out of like raw meat and all sorts of stuff just to like get food. It's like, oh my god.
Everybody should this is not happening where he's
the acid trip.
Taking acid for the first time, and I don't know. Anyway, lots of great stories.
So hold on, I got to bring something about that acid trip, and we'll get back on track. There's a great bit where he does acid, and like he had done it a few more times throughout the years, but there's one instance in particular where they were at SST, and he did it with a couple of the roadies for Black Flag, and like they were all just listening to records, just hanging out. The other guys put on like Grateful Dead and stuff like that. Henry puts on the Apocalypse Now soundtrack. He's like, it's tremendous. He's like, there are these lines of like Colonel Kurt saying stuff. The horror. Horror. Like, oh my God.
So I feel like with a lot of this band's like output, they likely booked it around touring. They recorded all of their parts first, like the band, the instrumentation was all recorded first, and then Henry came back in with Chuck and Greg to like overdub the vocal parts. This was supposed to be released through MCA and their kind of like subsidiary Unicorn Records, which it was. However, there was a head of the MCA label who basically felt like he had to, he straightened out his tie. Like, oh, I'm a parent, and this is a very like anti-parent record. They put it. I'm not exactly sure. I'd love to know how they got connected with MCA, being like, we can release this on our own. I'm sure the band, like, someone's going to pay us money to do this. Like, fuck yeah, I don't care. Like, whatever. They pressed like a ton of copies for this at the time. And, but yeah, the MCA label was just like, we're not going to do that. And I think there's even a story about them maybe like going to the plant and putting these stickers, like this is an anti-parent record, and quoting the guy and putting it on some of the copies of the actual record itself. They got like an independent distributor, like they went with a different distribution. And that's kind of what caused this lawsuit with Unicorn. They said it was like a breach of contract. And even the whole thing kind of sounds like, reading on it, and, you know, the whole thing kind of sounds a little fishy, where maybe even MCA saw that Unicorn, their label, was like hemorrhaging money. And they were like, we're going to use this as an excuse to maybe like, we're not doing this. We're not going to spend all this money trying to, you know, put out this record that we like don't give a shit about. But Unicorn basically sues Black Flag for doing that. They're going with the, you know, different distribution. And so they're kind of locked up in court for at least a few years. They couldn't.
3 years.
Yeah, 3 years. Couldn't release a record. So My War doesn't, you know, yeah. I mean, even these songs alone, I mean, they had been playing these songs apparently forever. Like a lot of these songs, like some of these songs were recorded on previous EPs. They had been playing these songs live for a long time. So when they finally got around to doing it, now you're like, fuck, like we got a lawsuit on our hands. I mean, the only reason they were even able to release My War was because Unicorn went fucking bankrupt. Like they lost all their money and they couldn't sue them anymore.
It's wild too, because without that lawsuit, you don't get the first 4 years compilation. You don't get the Everything Went Black compilation, which are two classic, you know, compilations for this band. But that was the only way the band could really like release stuff, was they had to do it in that fashion. It was all released through SST. And I know there's quotes from different members of the band of like, this period of time for the band was the hardest period of the time, because it not like there was going to be a ton of money coming in for this band, but there was the chance of that happening if it had gotten released properly, right? If they were able to tour and record more and put records out. I mean, a 3-year gap in, you know, from 81 to 84, when like hardcore was kind of at its creative peak at that point, was fucking wild when you think of all the other bands that were putting out releases and touring, and Black Flag's already probably playing a few of the My War era songs during this period of time just because they wanted to play new shit.
I will say I did find it funny. Well, probably wasn't funny for them, but you know, we're decades apart from this now, where like even releasing some of those like those compilations in between the records, I think they continued to sue them for that. And then I want to say maybe Chuck and Greg like had to spend a night in jail or two. What's it called? It's they were held in contempt of court or something like that. So
I'm kind of surprised that they didn't like fucking break into whatever warehouse this was and just steal the records. Like, that doesn't seem like out of the realm of possibility. But B, I'm also surprised that they didn't change their band name to some like dumbass smarmy thing like Black Flag or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, definitely not Black Flag is their band name, and like release something under that instead.
Another weird thing, I think, if I have it right, is that, of course, MCA was like, we're not going to release this record, but they did release the TV Party single.
Yes.
They like commissioned it for Repo Man, which the band had like no say in, essentially. They were like, the label like did that whole thing. So I do find it funny, like, yeah, you take the hit. We'll make money off of this. We're not going to release your record, and you can spend a few years in court trying to battle this shit, but we'll take that one for sure.
I think we had a similar discussion to something like this when we did our Cramps episode, when it came to like labels and being weird, and especially when Swindle and I were talking about the Dead Kennedys record. There was some weird stuff with the record label with that one. These kind of like proto early hardcore bands like this just all ended up in this weird spiral with these record labels, because it was always a major label, right? It was never just like some ma and pa place, right? but that's how you ended up with Alternative Tentacles. And that's how you ended up with SST being a thing and being more predominant in the punk and hardcore scene. So going through all this bullshit helped create some of the fundamental, hardcore labels at the time.
If there is a lesson to take from this, it's don't just sing about not trusting power. Actually, don't trust power because it is gonna fuck you over.
Ooh, Taco Bell.
Oh my God. So yes, the lineup: Henry Rollins, Greg Ginn, Dez Cadena, Chuck Dukowski, and Robo. Shall we get into the songs of this record?
Hell, I guess.
We open up with perhaps maybe one of the most signature songs of the era. I think the opening itself, the band's discography, there's so many things I could say about this, but Rise Above, opening track. What a track it is.
One of the better opening tracks. It definitely does the thing that it needs to do. It lets you know what the fuck is going to happen early.
Yeah.
The chromatic kind of major third double stop that just enters that in. The hi-hat, the drums just kicking it right in. And that's the riff. If the band is known for one riff in particular, it's this one and this one alone. And then, first full length, first time anybody's ever heard Henry Rollins really on a big record. He's no longer Henry Garfield. At 28 seconds in, he's Henry Rollins. It's wild to hear how young he is on this release too. Like you can hear it. I think the Henry Rollins name is a nod to HR, if I remember right. Obviously big Bad Brains fans. He and Ian were, and I think all three of us are as well. It's weird. This track is kind of weird because it has all the blendings of what the band was known for at the time, which was this fast, aggressive form of punk rock. It still had some of the chanty gang vocals in it. Had a riff, which comes from kind of their fundamentals of playing music. You've even got some solos in which Greg Ginn, not a very good guitar player, but he's got this interesting way of soloing, which is what I call the non-solo. And I think Austin calls it the same thing. But you hear two different solos on this one, and you can immediately go, well, that's Dez, because it's in key, and it's almost Slayer-esque at certain points. And then you hear Greg, and it's like, there he is.
Yep. Yeah, the Greg Ginn, Kerry King non-solo for sure. I would say that this is probably some of the better soloing on the record, in my opinion.
Agreed.
This opening song. But yeah, it's just like an anthem. Like it is the, war cry, just being against XYZ. Put it here.
Yeah.
I am against it for sure.
The Ramones.
I'm against it, dude.
It's let's lynch the landlord. Like it's.
Yeah. It's funny how vague they are.
Yes.
This song is it's bad.
Yes.
But like we're not going to say what it is.
So it's bad, but it gets worse throughout the record.
It is like some of the songs, they don't necessarily have a specific thing, but you get a general idea of like, we're against a lot of this shit, just like you are. So maybe it's easy to like maybe attach that to a particular thing, if you're listening to it and you're like, Henry Rollins is 20 years old when he's singing a lot of these songs. I'm sure a lot of 19-year-olds probably are mad at a lot of things.
And they don't know why.
Yeah.
It's essentially a great record about fuck the motherfuckers. That's essentially what it is. Like there's no direct person they're mad at in this track. Later on, there's a couple of them they point out exactly who they're mad at. And I can't wait to get into that. But great opening track, classic track. It's up there with Nervous Breakdown, I believe, maybe neck and neck, those two, whenever it pops up. There are other tracks that are probably more known, but those are the classic tracks. But another classic track, and one of my favorites on the record is Spray Paint.
Spray paint the wall. Yeah.
It's gnarly. It's fast as fuck hardcore. There's kind of a riff motif throughout. It's not even really a riff. It's just a motif that repeats itself. I think Henry sounds pretty aggressive on this one. It sounds like his voice is blown out. Who knows how many takes he's done of it. Just a nasty, quick hardcore song.
It's almost a precursor to Power Violence because it's like
50
seconds long and you like can't even really hear what the guitar is doing a lot of the time.
No. Speaking of blown out, a lot of this there's not really much distinguishing between the bass and the guitars at some points on this record.
There's 2 guitar players on this record.
Yeah.
You can't hear it. It just sounds like everybody recorded to a mono track and it's just there and they're like faders all on 10.
But with that, I will say too, it's like, it is a wall of sound. It's noisy. It's fucking sleazy. There's not like, there's out of tune, parts.
Oh,
to
absolutely.
Some of the playing. But there's so much character to that. And like I love it.
The fun thing that's all over the record is when the songs start and the guitar kicks in, you can hear Greg flip the fucking switch because the guitar didn't have a knob. It was just a switch. It was those plexi guitars, those Dan Armstrong plexi guitars. He would just flip the switch and kick into it. I think there were no fucking noise gates at this time. Everything was just on 10. Like, crank it and go. And like, there are certain points where it gets quiet and you can hear a couple of the guys muting their strings and like kind of nervously accidentally hitting them or the sticks rattling. It's amazing. It just adds this very guerrilla warfare kind of play with how this band recorded. And being able to for the music to be able to reflect that as well is pretty fucking interesting.
Then we got Six Pack.
Hey, there's Chuck. Hey,
there's Chuck.
Hey, there's Chuck.
I think this is a very quintessential punk bass line. That intro is 100% there. And there's a couple tracks on this album that I think have that as well. And Chuck has a nasty bass sound. It's probably a P bass just through some whatever tube head they had, just dimed out, aggressive sounding. It's another classic track. It's Black Flag, right? It's got all the traits of Black Flag in it, the weird guitar sounds, the noises, Greg's out of tune, off key, whatever it is, jazz solos that he's got. Like, it's a great track. I got a 6-pack and nothing to do. I got a 6-pack and I don't need you.
That first verse, from like the moment the bass starts until they like get in the chorus, is like the kind of the first time a part has been repeated to the point that just the first verse by itself is almost as long as Spray Paint. Like the whole song.
There's a track later in the record that I actually timed it. I'm like, that's fucking ridiculous of how long it takes to get to the song. But no, there's a couple tracks like that on this record, which I think there's a great juxtaposition between certain writers' credits and how their songs are written. And Chuck and Greg seem to be doing a lot of the writing during this period, which I think much later it mainly became Greg. But you can definitely tell the Chuck songs from the Greg songs, not because the bass is as prominent as it is, but the lyrics. Dukowski's got this very kind of poetic, like kind of aggravated, like prose to him when it comes to writing lyrics, whereas Greg's just like, oh.
This song, I will say, at some points there's like, and this might be just like the switch you're talking about, but like, the tone of the guitars is like significantly more fuzzed out on this track, and it like kind of switches to that. So I would wonder what kind of gear he was using, if it was like I don't know if it would be like a fuzz face or some just weird off-brand fucking pedal or something. But it's there's times where maybe some of the tracks sound significantly more filthy than the other ones. I remember, we talked about this before, but like years ago, I was a really big fan of this band. I guess I am still a fan of this band called The Shrine. They just haven't done anything in a long time. But I'm almost fairly certain the guy has
the board
Chuck's gear.
He has, it's the mixing board or the PA unit or something like that. Yes, you're right. I remember reading that as well. And I think either Chuck played through that or Greg played through that. Because a lot of the gear these guys had, they just bought, something broke, they bought a new one, right? There was no like tie-in. Like talking about gear on this album is just interesting because it's whatever they could find. They were probably playing at certain points through some old Sun Coliseum heads or stuff like that, just loud, and probably plugged straight in. Hell, and the fuzz you're hearing could just be the two different guitars at one time too, just like at different points. We're never ever going to get a breakdown of what the gear was on this record because no one fucking knows. Spot's dead. Like nobody likes Greg.
I think it's interesting how long the verse riff is, considering it's like 4 notes, but it's such a long riff that repeats all of those notes like kind of over and over and over again.
Yeah. This song is a Chuck song, if I'm not mistaken. What I See, you get again like filthy bass tone. It's melodic. It like kind of overpowers everything else at certain points, but I think my favorite part of it is some of Robo's playing it, and they do mention that he had like some bracelet or like some jewelry that he was wearing, where like the rattle of the jewelry actually like made it on the recording and was just shaking, and it just adds to the sound of the record.
Is this the track that's got the lyrics? You're not right.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not right.
I'm not right. You're not right. I love it.
I feel like during the verses, the guitar is more of just like a wall noise kind of like soundscape, and the bass is really the riff of the song.
Chuck was like, "You ain't doing shit."
I mean, a lot of these songs, they just kind of build and build until they explode. And when I listen to this song, and like a lot of these songs, especially like being young and like so angry, and you get the context from the book, I can almost envision Henry just pacing back and forth, just like seething, just ready to hit somebody.
Well, his recording was, and he's done it on later records too. He's like, I've always recorded with the headphones tied to my head because I get so into it. He's like, I'm walking around with an SM57 or an SM58, whichever one it is. And he's like, I've just got the mic or the headphones taped to my head because they'll fly the fuck off if not. There's obviously during the My War sessions, he's like, there were points and times where like I was recording the track My War and I'm just bouncing my body off the fucking walls, like doing all this shit just to get these takes. It's like, yeah, I get it. I can see it. What I See, Chuck track, but then you get to like the weird track on the album for me because it really doesn't sound like anything else on the record. It sounds like the band tried to write kind of like a hit in a weird way, which is TV Party. It's the one track with a video with a budget of $4.
I think they recorded that like a year later. I think it was like recorded in 82 or something. But yeah, it is kind of interesting. I remember because it seemed like, I feel like I remember reading where, yes, this is so kind of like off character. We tried to write like, here's like verse, chorus, whatever, that it was like almost hard for them to do that. Or at least like, I don't know. There was just something about it that made it difficult for Henry or whoever. Like we just
major key song too. Like it's recognizable track, fun bass line, kind of deceptively intricate of a bass line too. It seems a lot easier than what it actually be. Makes me think of the Violent Femmes track. Is it Holiday in the whatever that hit is?
Yeah, it's Holiday in the
yeah. Has the same kind of motif with that.
Blistered in the Sun.
Blistered in the Sun. Thank you. My favorite part of this song isn't necessarily the lyrical concepts or the lyrical scheme. It's the yelling and screaming from the different members of the band of the TV shows from the 70s and 80s. Yes! Monday Night Football! It's like, what?
There's like a couple versions of this because I know there's they don't match up of them ever, and I'm like always think I feel like the video version is different from the the one on the record. So you think like you're like I don't know what fucking Monday Night Football, and it doesn't match up with the fucking Dallas.
Imagine being in like the vocal booth and having to do that. All right, guys, you got to remember to say this. Jake and the Fat Man.
Simon and Simon.
The end of that part seems like it's about to fall apart every single time. Like it seemed like they just caught the verse by luck.
They did.
every single time.
Yep.
Of all the tracks on the record, I bet there are more fucking takes of this song than any of them.
I believe
Yeah.
it. There apparently are some like lost versions, like alternate, like some. I think maybe even like I think there's some stuff with Dez out there that like a lot. Maybe some of this stuff there. I don't know. I feel like and I could be wrong. Maybe I read somewhere that like maybe a quote from Spot or whoever that there might be like a whole version with like Dez doing stuff or whatever, and like. Maybe a whole song that just didn't get released on the record, just lost to time, lost to, maybe somewhere at the church under, Dez's sleeping bag or Ron's sleeping bag.
I think you're right, because I think with every vocalist they've had, they were always intended for the first full length. And I think Dez was intended to sing on this full record. So there's probably the bulk of this record with his vocals on it. And I'm sure someone has that and won't ever release them.
Another anti-drinking song, Thirsty and Miserable, with fuzz the fuck out sound. I mean this whole first half of the record is just like filled with the songs that I like. So I mean, they're just some of the catchiest. I mean, I say that, it's like noisy as shit. There's so much feedback, and it's like kind of just like the filthiest kind of like feral sounding music, but there's still a lot of melody. There's still a lot of like memorable parts that have just been seared into my brain.
I was just gonna say the first half of this record definitely seems catchier than the second half, and the second half just seems fucking wild and interesting, like almost a noise rock project or an art project of some sort. But this track, I love this track. I also like the St. Vitus version on Born Too Late. That's fucking awesome. Another SST band, another SST album. It's catchy. It's aggro all at the same time. It has this riff with these big bends in it all over it. Rollins' voice is blown out, which I think is the best sounding Rollins. Especially this early on. I think Robo in this track has some standout parts as well. And you've got Greg and Dez kind of going back and forth on solos.
I feel like the song is kind of different. There are like every song is fast on this fucking album, but there are a few songs that like seem like they are moving along way faster than the other songs. Like the riffs move ahead more instead of like repeating the same notes or repeating the same parts more. And this song, it moves in like a way that like Kylesa song, like it's just like steady and fast and always going forward and not taking its time to repeat.
It's got a fucking key change in it too.
They did it.
Oh, modulation? Sure.
The first track that Henry tried out for with Black Flag during that New York trip, Police Story. It's great. It just it feels like it kicks right from Thirsty and Miserable to like this one. It does that like weird line of feedback, like it's almost like the tape's fucked up or something, and then it just kicks right into it.
2 notes.
That's it.
Yeah,
that's all you need.
That's all you need. The verse is 2 notes, and the chorus is 2 different notes.
There's a Lou Reed quote that's like 1 note's fine, 2's pushing it, 3's like art bullshit or something.
Black Flag and Cops. That's like peanut butter and mayonnaise. They just go really well together, right? Cool track, great track. Again, they're mad as hell about it, and this is one of the first tracks on the record where they're like, we know who we're mad at and we're going to talk about it.
Right. Probably didn't do themselves any. I always like found it so funny, like being detached and like, I was born in the mid 90s, and like you read them like, really? Learning later that cops will invest their time on like really dumb shit in general, but like, yeah, we're just gonna like hound and fucking harass this hardcore band, or like all of these kids that, you know, it just seems so insane to me to hear all these stories where it's like, yeah, we're camped out front, or we like shut down a show, like this like old abandoned church or wherever the fuck they were. Or I mean, you look at the Get in the Van cover, it's like they're playing with the Ramones and there's just like an army of cops out front.
They're in the riot gear on the cover. The cops are in riot gear. And most of the time, those shows, the cops weren't coming there. And they weren't even coming there to break up the show. They were just going there to start shit. It had nothing to do. They were like, there's a punk show. Let's go down and fuck up these kids. And there's a great Henry quote of, he and Dukowski were hanging out. And at one point, they were putting flyers up. And he goes, all of a sudden, like Dukowski's throwing me across the street. And I just felt this zzz go by my head. And it was a riot cop with his baton going right by his head. And he felt the whistle go by his head. Like it whistle. He goes, and it would have scattered my brains across the concrete.
The funny thing is, like, they weren't the fucking Black Panther. Like, this song is about the cops, but it's not even really like scathing. It's just like late teenage feelings about cop, like definitely feelings from a teenage white person. He's not saying like that the whole history of the like of policing in America is fucked up and like based on race and class. Like, he's just like, cops make me angry. And for some reason, the cops feel the need to like line up at their shows and beat the shit out of like little white kids. And also, like, when you said the church was tapped, I was just in my head, I was like, they were not like Huey P. Newton. Like, they weren't saying anything. Like, what the fuck?
That's true. I think they were just
they're bored. They're bored.
Right.
They're bored. They had to hit quota for the month. It's remarkable because you hit the nail on the head. Like, this wasn't an organized, it's an episode of the fucking Boondocks, basically. This wasn't an organized thing. It's like, we're playing this loud, fast, abrasive music. I think Jello's police truck. I think Jello's police truck was far more scathing than this track. Cause like, he's basically talking about cops going out and cornholing some guy. And it's like, fuck. And you know, a few years later, 7-8 years later, you get NWA like coming out with Fuck the Police. And it's like, okay, it's a long line of this shit. And you know, it's remarkable because different generations see who Henry Rollins is and what Henry Rollins was, right? Like I think most of people our age probably got it from this era, but there's so many people that know him more for his solo work, right? And what he looked like during that era. Very like chiseled kind of depiction of a weightlifter. And it's remarkable that a lot of cops look that way at certain points.
Yeah.
It's just remarkable that they've adopted that style. And he's like, even to this day, like you'll see interviews from 2025 and he's still making cracks at the police. It's like, fair, fucking he should. And you know what? Bunch of fucking jarheads.
I do really love that like little tappy ending thing at the very end of the song. Like, just like a little tapping solo run or something. And then right into the fucking kick drums.
Yep. Fucking, this was we covered a couple songs on this record for our Halloween show, and I like had the most trouble with this shit. And I don't know if it's just because I'm bad at guitar or if like maybe this was just the way they recorded and structured this was just like, what are you doing?
It's a very weird timing.
The drums are fun.
Yeah.
I love the drums.
Yeah. It's in 4, it's obvious, but it's like, it's got like an odd feel to it that it makes it really difficult. The guitars don't come in on the beat. They're slightly off. So it feels kind of greasy and it's really hard to lock into. And the vocals come in a weird spot and they're very like disjointed. So it's a really interesting song. But one of the harder ones on the album to probably cover, to be honest. Like Thirsty and Miserable would be it's kind of a straightforward song. Like Rise Above is very straightforward, but this is a weird one. And it's a pretty catchy song. The lyrics aren't like, some long poetic thing. It's like, it could be about anything. Right. And that's the type of songs that are kind of cool. And it's like, it could hit anybody at a different point. But I went back and listened to the Keith Morris version of this recently, and even he had a hard time with the timing. And you hear it and it's like, oh, this is just a weird track overall. And I've heard people cover this song on different records, and they actually change the timing of it up so it's a little bit more locked in. And it's like, okay, that's a little bit more on the nose. But the weirdness of this song ends out essentially the poppiest side of the record, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, that's fair. Because I mean, like, what I do love about this record is that a lot of it feels, while there is like some simple kind of maybe like rock structure or whatever, there is like a sense of like improv and like it kind of just being feel and like kind of straight from the gut. They weren't spending a lot of time on these. They just did it. And that's like very endearing to me. But like, you get a song like fucking Depression where that almost like opens like a fucking Doom or like drone track with the way that kicks off with just a feedback wall of sound. But then I love it too, where you're like, okay, here, we're just going to have the slow part for like half the song. Bam, it's fast now. We're cooking.
Bomb goes off. Hank's on 10. It is, it's an aggressive, doomy, slightly melodic song about a man with nothing left. And we've all been there. Man, 2013 was a weird fucking year. And it's just like, after reading Get in the Van and reading the lyrics to this song, it's so much more fitting with a lot of these, the B-side of this record's like tracks and lyrics and everything. The main riff on this is really fucking solid. It's really fucking fast too. There's a little bit of a solo going on. Just all the cool things about this song are just great. And man, I love the second half of this record a lot. We talked off air. Like I think there's one or two songs that didn't necessarily need to be on the record personally, but the second half to me is just fucking noisy and chaotic and just wild. It sounds like a completely different band. It doesn't even sound like what comes next either. It just sounds like a different band.
This is one of the other songs on the album that's like more when it does kick into the fast part, it's very forward moving and driving and not like doubling back to repeat notes and repeat phrases.
It's a long riff too. It's a bunch of chords, but it's long.
Yeah, I mean, like this song, the subject matter on Room 13, I didn't like, most of us aren't lyric folk, but I feel like the subject matter they're tapping into on here isn't like something that typically was talked about before. I feel like some of the other stuff is like, the Ramones songs are like fun and they do talk about real life, but I don't really, maybe I'm stupid and not an actual fan, but like, I don't recall it being like as this like kind of the approach to like actual like mental health and kind of like gut wrenching depression. I don't typically connect that with the Ramones, although I do know there are a lot of songs that do come from growing up in New York and living in that area. But Room 13, pretty straightforward track. I think there's like maybe 2 chords for the most part, or like maybe 1 chord and like just a bunch of bends like throughout the whole track.
Those dissonant bends, right? That's kind of the first tasting of slight dissonance you get in there, because Rise Above seems like it's dissonant, but it's a major third. But this one has that dissonant. It's a little bit. It's almost a more depraved and paranoid version of Depression, right? It's essentially about being in a padded room, essentially, of your mind, and it is wild because a lot of the lyrics on the band's output were written by Greg or Chuck, and very rarely did you get stuff from Henry. But when you did, it was in this vein. It was in this style. It was in this type of concept. Like even his solo output, The End of Silence is woof. That is a bleak fucking record, but many years in the future. I think this is one of those tracks I forget is on the record. I like it, but it's one of those that's like, God, there's so much around it that I forgot it was on there.
I just love that noise, the noisiness of this song. And there's really not much else. Like, they were just kind of like, let's make this song noisy and not make it much else other than noisy.
Yeah. I mean, same with, I love that it leads with Damage Too, but it's
Right.
like, this is another song where it's just noisy as shit.
Black Sabbath-esque intro, like a very like kind of Sabbathy intro to it, with some really cool shit that's more about me against the world kind of mentality.
This is another song that feels like it just the whole band completely falls the fuck apart like pretty much three times, and then they're lucky to have come back together like at the same part.
No More.
Another kind of like doomish intro with the bass and the drums.
That intro is rad.
Yeah. It also feels like we're young, we're just gonna do whatever, and it just builds. The way it builds is like kind of funny.
A minute and 14 seconds. The song itself is like 2.5 minutes long, but the song itself doesn't start until a minute and 14 in.
And they just kick in. Like,
the fact too is that you realize how good of a band this actually was, because that's really fucking tight. And Dukowski was kind of a fingers guy, and he's locking in with Robo's kicks really well. To a point that he's like, the pace just keeps building and building. And then there's that feedback guitar and it kicks right in. This is one of my favorite tracks on the album. And this is the track, like with every album I'm really a big fan of, this is the track that makes me think of the artwork. Oh
yeah. Which we didn't really touch on. I mean, with it being, and we talked about, it wasn't a, commission, piece by Greg's brother Raymond, but I always loved it because I thought, oh, he would do that. Like, even just seeing how intense he was in like some of those interviews, like, how's your not tour going? Oh, how's your not record doing? Like in the later interviews, but it was staged, of course. I think they broke the mirror with a hammer, and then like he placed his fist on it, and I think I could be wrong, but it's like red ink and
coffee grounds.
Yeah.
Yep,
so
that's it.
Iconic. I remember when I got it, I would stick the record cover up front, that and slip it in when I got it too. And I'm like, oh yeah, I don't think my parents are too stoked on it.
That's such a foul album cover. The slip it in cover is so foul to look at. It's such a viscerally ugly cover.
Yeah. The track. And it's got what is it? The vocalist of L7 on it.
Yes, that's right. Danita Sparks.
Maybe, I forget. I know
L7.
they're in L7 though, for sure.
Rad band. But No More.
Yeah. No More's rad. The rest of the record's really rad. I mean, Padded Cell's cool.
Yep. Forget about that one.
Yeah, that one I did kind of forget about. I'm like, this is catchy. But I feel like maybe by this point I'm kind of like, all right, we could probably like, I mean, 15 tracks is a lot. It's a lot of tracks. It is. Even for like, they're not terribly long songs by any means, but I don't know if you need all of these on here.
The band has never sounded like this ever again. For whatever, like this album is the outlier. It never sounded like this ever again. But when you look at like My War and the rest of the band's output, there's 3 records there that sound very similar.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure.
Like this is the first and last time this band ever sounded this way.
And I wonder if it's even like a case of like, okay, we've been playing these songs for a long fucking time. Let's just dump them all. Like, just here's everything we fucking got. And that's it. We have enough songs to fill an album, to fill up like a vinyl record. Here you go.
I will say, I don't know if the version you guys listened to had this, but the Apple Music version, wherever they got the original audio, had a glitch. So you hear these like computer noises, like beep boop, and these little swirls. It's fucking crazy. And it happens in Padded Cell like 4 times. And it's just that track and that track alone.
I do want to say about Padded Cell, there are many songs on this album that like the riffs are like 2 notes or 2 chords or like 3 chords. Padded Cell, the riff is long and there are lots of notes. It's very strange compared to much of the rest of this album.
Speaking of strange,
Life of Pain. There's like, I like this because it is like, this is a track especially that's like very, I would say, well, it's fuzzed out for one. It's got this like classic kind of like Black Flag off-kiltered thing. It's like very meandering and like just disorienting.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just
that dissonant thing. That is the most memorable thing on the track to me. It's kind of like this dissonant ending, dissonant beginning and ending, and this punk rock track in the middle of it. And it's like, hey, let's just do this weird shit that we're all into, but put, something really fast in the middle of it. And there's even some stuff on the track that feels very poppy, in a wild way. It's very upbeat and up tempo.
You said that the riff is disorienting. I think the drums like add to that sense of being disoriented because it's like not playing a fucking beat. He's just like playing like hits, and it's not like really a pattern either. He's just kind of like pop, 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 pop.
Robo tired. And then how Life of Pain ends with that kind of dissonant motif and then the breathing. And it enters into the most unhinged track on the whole fucking record. It's just a dirge and it's damaged. Damaged 1.
Yeah. And the record with Damage 1. I did write dirge as well. And, again, being straight from the gut, this is, I believe, Henry's first credit for the band. And it's all improvised. I think they did a couple takes and like this is the one they got.
There are points where he's just going off and making noises and it's beautiful. It's very, I know he's a big classic rock and like roots of rock and roll and roots music and just a fan of music in general. Like he's mentioned James Brown on a lot of different things. And I hear some of like the things he does on here. I'm like, oh yeah, there's some Howlin' Wolf stuff going on here and all sorts of shit. Like if you really get down to it, it's like, oh yeah, there's a bunch of rad shit he's doing on here, just going off.
He's trying everything. And with like a lot of the playing on the record, I mean, if you're improvising it, I doubt you ever did it the same live ever. Like I'm sure he never really did it the same way. And I feel like there are definitely some parts on this record as a whole, instrumentation wise, that they probably didn't play the same when they actually got to him live.
It sounds like a fucking hammer-on, but it's like a harmonic. I don't really know how, but that harmonic, those harmonics are fucking nasty, and then just like the fucking tritone kind of chord, like the super dissonant chord they're playing the whole time.
It's kind of Flipper-esque, like
yeah.
In a sense, like. It's a very antagonizing song, right? Because Black Flag, once they started touring, they were like, God, everybody's terrible. And we don't want to be part of like what this scene has become. So like, we're going to fuck with them. And they would like, I mean, there's the great story about like before their set, they would play ZZ Top's Eliminator album and just bum everybody out. And when people would gripe, they're like, this is fucking good music. Get over it. And this is part of that. This is what Swindle has said many times. Part of being a musician is just being a dick.
Trying to piss people off.
Yeah. Yep. And this is what it is. It's proto sludge.
And I know this is a one that they had like they had in the back pocket for a while. There's a version with Dez on Everything Went Black, as with like a couple other the songs on here. But yeah, you essentially end the record with this song, 34 minutes, 35 minutes. Okay. And the rest is history, I guess. They did a lot of touring, and I'm not about to try to dive into that because, you can find you could look up the archive. There's definitely a lot of information there. There's a great Instagram account called like Black Bard, I think, and they have like a ton of like it's almost like a calendar. They'll post like today's this day, and this is what this is where they played like on any given year on this date, and they have like it's just such a great archive of all of those like wonderful flyers and shows and stuff. But I also believe this is the last album to feature Robo and Chuck, because after this, you'd essentially get our Bill Stevenson, as well as Kira. I think there's some other members later on that I actually probably don't even remember the names of some of them, but
these are the two lineups that matter. Like, I think if you look at the Black Flag collective, and all the members, I think most people are going to lean towards either the Damage lineup or maybe the My War lineup, and both of those are two different sounding bands. I mentioned it earlier, and whether you're a fan of the blue record or if you're a fan of this black record, right? If you're a fan of either of those, that's probably what most people think of when they think of Black Flag. I would think like the EPs are great. Don't get me wrong, but I think the culmination of everything that Black Flag was on Damaged, and then My War was this complete turnaround of whatever it was. This band toured, as you said, toured its ass off. If you do want a little bit more dive, we've name dropped Get in the Van multiple times. There are so many detailed stories of shows in there from this era of the band and all the trouble that they went through. And there's less funny shit in there than anything, but there are a few funny moments that are enjoyable. This is a legendary record. It's a classic record.
All right, we've reached that point of the episode where we like to share some things we've been listening to, things we think you should check out. I've been on a big Salome kick as of late. I love the self-titled. Listen to their sophomore record, Terminal, and then they have their split with Thou, Our Enemy Civilization. All of it's great. All of it's, we're talking about noisy some shit. Terminal especially like has just like almost like a big chunk of that record is just some experimental noise, I think. It's heavy. It's fucking killer. Cat's vocal, I mean, their vocal performance on these records and Agoraphobic Nosebleed and just unreal. So, yeah, I've been checking those out as of late.
My rec is, boy, is it worlds different than what we fucking covered today. An artist that I like named Thanya Iyer released an album on April 30th called Tide, and it's spelled two different ways. It's via Top Shelf Record. It's like her singing is very jazzy. There's a lot of fucking instruments and a lot of layers. The lyrics are like very wholesome, trying to make you feel good about being alive and being whole as a human being, which like 99% of the music I like is usually going the opposite way, but it feels good to feel good sometimes. So that's my rec.
Okay, feeling good about feeling good. Based off of our conversation we recently had with our good buddy David, I mentioned some Roadrunner Records bands a lot, so I dug into Machine Head's catalog, and I always go back to their sophomore release, The More Things Change, which was released in 1997. The follow-up to their debut, Burn My Eyes. There's some great tracks on there. 10 Ton Hammer, opening track, just dissonant and just bent, warped, whatever you want to call it. There's a great thrash track on the album called Bay of Pigs. It's nasty. There's some Neurosis influence all over the album. Rob is still real young and pissed off at this point before he got really technical on a couple records later. Great album. It's not a new metal record. Get over yourselves. It's just a fucking rad record. And then the next thing I have is, as of present time, this is the newly released Propagandhi album. At Peace, and their final release single for that album, which is No Longer Young. Got into these guys about 4 or 5 years ago and dug down the catalog, and their last 4 records have just been this great kind of blending of skate punk and melodic hardcore and some early 80s like heavy metal thrown in for good taste. Great fucking band, has a great message. Definitely really digging that.
Hell yeah. Check out Damage. If you've not listened to that, listen to the record. We'll definitely be back. I feel like we'll definitely have an episode dedicated to My War. But yeah, this was just like after the editing fucking battle that I had with the Damage the band. Also, keeping track of that in the notes. That 2 episodes right next to each other was a little difficult, but I'm so happy with the way that came out. So yeah,
and we would confuse the shit out of each other in the chat too, and be like, "So we're doing Damage this week?
Oh my god,
we're doing Damage the album next week." And we're doing
have like a Kermit the Frog fit in the background.
Dylan uploaded his audio to the folder for this one because I was like looking for it. I was like, "Where the fuck did it go?" And he was like, "Oh,
that's amazing."
But yeah, listen to this record. Listen to Black Flag. Yeah, we'll do My War at some point for sure. But until then, thank you for joining us. For myself, for Swindle, for Dylan, you can follow us at Riff Worship Pod at Instagram and Twitter. There's links below to our official playlist, Riffs on Repeat, Hits from the Crypt, wherever you stream music, whether Spotify or Apple Music. Dylan does reviews on our YouTube channel every now and then, some more contemporary releases of things also we think you should be checking out. But yeah, we'll see you next week with someone or something else. Bye.